Hello students. In the last class, we have broadly discussed about the different use cases of blockchain, the applications where you can possibly utilize blockchain as the technology. And we have seen that what questions you should ask to develop or to design an application or an use case with the help of blockchain. And then we had a detailed discussion of one of the potential use cases of blockchain, that is the land registry management and land trading. And there we have seen that, we can potentially use blockchain for that particular use case, but there are many open questions that need to be answered to have a kind of good solution that can be developed on top of blockchain. So in today's class, what we'll broadly do, we are going to discuss about a few of the applications which have already been developed and tested over blockchain environment, and people have gained a lot of understanding, or rather some knowledge about what applications are more suitable for blockchain and what are the potential advantage and uh, problems you can face if you try to design an application with the help of blockchain. So today we are going to look into few such use cases, particularly in the financial domain, because financial domain is something where there are interesting applications of blockchain, and many of those applications have been deployed in different government use cases, as well as for the example in case of banking sectors. So we are going to look into few of such applications today, and one of those prominent application is cross-border payment. And interestingly, this cross-border payment is the classic use case for which Bitcoin was created, and not only the Bitcoin, but a large number of cryptocurrencies was created, keeping in mind that it can facilitate easy way of doing cross-border payments. So, if you remember the primary objectives behind the design of such cryptocurrencies, the main objective was that you can have a currency which is not under control of any of the government or any of the bank, and that way you can use that particular currency in an open marketplace. Now, whenever you can use that currency, no one will be able to track you, and you do not need to bother about the conversion rate. And that way, the currency is not under the control of any government. And consequently, the same currency can be utilized for doing payments across different countries, and that can potentially make this kind of cross-border trading much more easier and much more with having much more lower cost. So that way the cryptocurrencies have become very popular in the community, and till now we have over 6,000 such cryptocurrencies. But interestingly, one important question that we need to think of, that what qualifies as a currency? Well, because we are seeing so many cryptocurrencies, like not only about Bitcoin, but some of the names you have already heard of, like Litecoin, Ether, and so on, Algo in case of Algorand. But the question remains that what qualifies as a currency? Now, in economics, it says that a particular component, or rather a particular token, to be considered as a currency, uh, you need to satisfy three primary criteria. So the first criteria is that the medium of exchange, which tells that whether the merchants are willing to accept the currency in exchange of goods and services. The second requirement is to understand or define the unit of account. So we need to think of whether it is a measure of the real value of goods and service. So, for example, whether a merchant will be interested to accept the same value regardless of the relative currency fluctuations. Well, and the final requirement is the store of value. So, the token which we are calling as a currency, that should have certain mode of investment in the sense that I can invest with the help of that currency. Well, so the price of the currency will fluctuate, that will follow the economic rules, and that way I can invest on that currency, and later on I can make profit from that currency if the price of the currency get increased over time. So these are the kind of typical requirements of a particular token to be designated as a currency. Now, to support cross-border payments, as I have mentioned, that there are multiple different cryptocurrencies that have been designed particularly for these applications, and two of the prominent such cryptocurrencies are the Ripple and Stellar. So, we are going to look into that. What are the properties of Ripple and what are the properties of Stellar, and how they facilitate in cross-border payments. So first we are going to look into the Stellar protocol and network. So Stellar is a decentralized hybrid blockchain platform with open membership. It was launched in 2014. It used Lumens as the native asset. So Lumens is the kind of currency which is used in the Stellar network. So the Stellar protocol is particularly the consensus protocol that is used in this network. From the name Stellar comes. So the Stellar consensus protocol is particularly a mode of Byzantine agreement protocol over an open network, which is called federated Byzantine agreement. We are going to look into this federated Byzantine agreement, not in complete details, but we are going to get an overview of it. So the broad idea of federated Byzantine agreement is that it forms something called quorum. So we have seen earlier the idea of quorum. So the quorums are formed based on participants who have their individual trust decision. Well, so followed by certain agreements within the quorum. So what does it mean? We are going to see that with the help of an example. But broadly, it says that we are going to have a kind of Byzantine agreement in an open environment. Now, whenever you are thinking of having Byzantine agreement in an open environment, the first challenge that comes, as we have seen earlier, is that the participants, they do not know each other. Now, when the participants do not know each other, you cannot use a protocol based on message passing. But what you can do, or what you can ensure that, well, it might happen that all the participants do not know each other, but I can know the participants who are in my community, or who are kind of peer to myself, or maybe the peer of my peers. Right? So certain part of the community I can know. So what this federated Byzantine agreement tries to do, it tries to run the Byzantine agreement protocol among these small communities where the peers know each other. Now that way you can form some kind of local quorum based on the local agreement, and this local quorum gets propagated further. Now you see that ultimately, although it is an open network, but it is a peer-to-peer network, right? So I have certain peers whom I know, and I am connected to the network via those peers. So I might not know the entire network, but I know a part of it. Now, when I know a part of it, what I try to do, that I try to convince my vote, or rather try to generate a quorum among the people whom I know. Now that way, say you can just think of it in this way, that the people within IIT Kharagpur, they know each other. Now when the people within IIT Kharagpur, they know each other, they try to form a local quorum among them. Now outside IIT Kharagpur, we have different localities, like we have Talbagicha, that is a region just outside IIT Kharagpur. Then another side of IIT Kharagpur, there is this Prem Bajar. Well, so I guess that you know that. Now, what happens that the people of Talbagicha, they know each other, so they try to form a local quorum among themselves. Similarly, the people at Prem Bazar, they know each other, so they try to form a local quorum among themselves. Now, interestingly, what happens that there are some people who are common between IIT Kharagpur and Talbagicha or IIT Kharagpur and Prem Bazar. Why? Because the people are staying at Prem Bazar and coming to IIT Kharagpur. So they basically work as a kind of gateway or a kind of relay who are forwarding a quorum's decision to another quorum. Well, so through those people, the quorum that have been formed within IIT Kharagpur, that quorum gets propagated to Talbagicha, or that quorum gets propagated to, say, Prem Bazar. And the same way, the quorum that have been formed within Prem Bazar, that gets propagated back to IIT Kharagpur. So that way, the individual quorums that have been formed, they try to come up with a larger quorum by sharing their individual quorum's view. And gradually, what happens that over the network, they comes to a kind of global quorum. That means a kind of global agreement where everyone agrees to a common value. Well, so that is the kind of broad idea behind Federated Byzantine Agreement. But in practice, what have been seen that this Federated Byzantine Agreement doesn't take a long time. Rather, it takes around 2 to 5 second transaction time, transaction clearance time. And as I mentioned, that there are some common people who form this quorum. Now, through such kind of quorum, what Stellar can support direct conversion between one currency, typically the native currency of Stellar, that is Lumen, and other global currency like the Indian rupee, US dollar, euro, and so on. Now, there are certain nodes in the Stellar network which are called anchors. So, these anchors, they act as bridge between a given currency and the Stellar network. Right? And with the help of this anchor, Stellar design a distributed exchange where you can pay in euro while you have balance in INR in your account, and the network will automatically convert it at the lowest fare for it. That what is the lowest conversion rate from INR to euro and vice versa. Now here is the link to the website of Stellar, so you can basically browse through this website to get an understanding about the details of Stellar, to get to know that what are the internal components of Stellar, how the protocol broadly work. You can see that what are the transactions which are going on, because remember that it is a blockchain based network, so a kind of transparent network. Also, you can see that who are the different organization who have taken participate in the Stellar network. Well, so that way you can find out all these things, and then you can have this tab learn where there are different components like the discussion on lumens, the anchors, well, so the power of Stellar. So you can actually browse to it to know the details of this Stellar protocol and the Stellar network. So as I was mentioning that this Stellar network supports such kind of trading. It works like a cryptocurrency for cross-border trading. So interestingly, this idea was a kind of concept that got a kind of formal proof and formal verification, and this idea got published in a paper at SOSP 2019. SOSP is one of the top tier conference in the domain of operating systems. So the title of the paper is Fast and Secure Global Payments with Stellar. So you can actually look into this paper and you can get to know that what are the different formal properties that Stellar supports. Now, this concept of Federated Byzantine Agreement that I was talking about, within Federated Byzantine Agreement, the core concept that Stellar uses, it is called federated voting. So in federated voting, the nodes try to agree on abstract statements by first voting, then accepting, and finally confirming the statement. So there are three states of agreement. One is called voting, the second one is accept, and the third one is confirm. Well, so the core idea is something like that, as an participant of the Stellar network, you can keep on voting on any valid statement. So that is something like your local belief of validness. So you believe that a statement is valid, so you are providing a vote for that particular statement. Now, a statement is accepted when it gets a majority vote in the locality. That means, say for example, I will accept a statement when I see that majority of my peers are going to vote that particular statement. So that way it forms these local quorums. And finally, it confirms when these individual local quorums unanimously accepts a statement. So here is an example. So assume that this is a network, and as you can see that there are two communities in this network, this upper part and the lower part, and there are two nodes which are actually working like a connector between these two communities. Now, in these individual communities, people have their separate belief, and accordingly, they are voting a statement. So, in the upper community, it is giving a vote to X, and in that lower community, it is giving a vote to Y. And that way, individual nodes put up their votes. Now, if you look into the upper community, so the nodes keeps on seeing that, well, among my peers, I have maximum vote to X, so it accepts X. In the lower community, it says that among my peers, the maximum vote is for Y, so it starts accepting Y. But what happens that whenever in the upper community, it keeps on seeing that the majority accepts X, so that means a local quorum is formed on X. Now, when a local quorum gets formed on X, then this local quorum get propagated further because this particular node, it sees that it has around 3 votes for Y, whereas there is a local quorum on X with 4 votes. Well, so here you can think of that these two persons are someone who are carrying out the information from IIT Kharagpur to Prem Bazar and vice versa. So it is something like that. Whenever you are going from IIT Kharagpur to Prem Bazar, you are seeing that people are preferring Y, and then you are saying those people that, hey, why you are preferring Y? In IIT Kharagpur, we had 100 people who have preferred X. Well, so many of the people are preferring X, so you should prefer X. Well, because you are seeing less vote on Y. So that way, that information gets propagated, and the lower community gradually started accepting X, and incidentally, all the nodes accept on X, and that way, the agreement is received on X. And here you can see that we call it as a kind of federated voting because, as I know that we are working on a network where every node doesn't know each other. So when every node doesn't know each other, you cannot propagate the votes to others through message passing. You can only propagate it to your neighbors. And that way, with the help of the neighbors, these local quorums are getting formed. And gradually, you are having this global quorum accepting a particular statement in the consensus. So that way, this federated Byzantine agreement comes to a consensus. If you just try to look into the properties of Stellar, so Stellar is a partially synchronous protocol. It is safe under an asynchronous environment, but to ensure liveness, it makes an assumption of a synchronous network. So again, you can see that it is supporting the FLP impossibility. And if you try to look into the performance of Stellar, you can see that this is a graph that I have taken from that SSP paper. So here you can see that even with around 350 transactions per second, it has a latency of 1 second or less. Well, so that way you can see that it can commit the transactions very fast. So much more in a much more scalable way compared to Bitcoin. Now, apart from Stellar, another protocol which got a lot of visibility, that is the kind of cryptocurrency that got a lot of visibility, and people started exploring it for cross-border payment, is this Ripple protocol on the network. So Ripple was designed to have a protocol for banks to clear and settle payments in real time through a distributed network. It uses a consensus based on something called an XRP ledger. So XRP is the currency in Ripple. So the protocol is called XRPL. This consensus algorithm, XRPL consensus algorithm, allows payment exchanges and remittance to happen without need for a centralized clearinghouse. So in Ripple, it claims that it has an average of 5-second confirmation time. It doesn't use any mining. But interestingly, Ripple uses a custom protocol in XRPL, and this XRPL has not yet been validated for correctness and fault tolerance. And interestingly, there are research work which says that XRPL actually affects safety and violates this FLP impossibility argument. So in Ripple, there are gateway nodes that convert the fiat currencies. So fiat currency means the currency which are supported by different governments to XRP. So XRP is the currency in Ripple. And these market makers, they convert from one currency to another with the help of XRP. Um, so uh, Interestingly, if you see the market of Ripple, Ripple holds a large fraction of cryptocurrency. Means although the interesting fact is that the consensus algorithm in Ripple is not been validated, and there are argument against the correctness of the consensus algorithm, but it is still popular in the blockchain market. So you can actually again browse through the website of Ripple to get to know more about this particular cryptocurrency. So it contains a payment network that is typically used within this Ripple net. You can join the network for transferring currency from one source to another. And it has also this resource page where you can actually learn about this XRP and the corresponding protocol. And here you can see the different component of Ripple, the participants, and so on. I'd also suggest you to browse to this website to get to know about Ripple in details. Now, as I was mentioning that there are cross argument against Ripple, and unlike Stellar, there are open questions on Ripple consensus. So there is a paper called Analysis of the XRP Ledger Consensus Protocol by Brad and McBro. So if you look into this is a very interesting paper which actually shows that XRPL violates safety and liveness. So that way it is not a secure protocol. But there are cross arguments, and people are still exploring the internal of Ripple, and it is actually an interesting factor to investigate that why Ripple works. Right. Okay, so these are the kind of two cryptocurrencies which are kind of very much popular in the cryptocurrency market nowadays, and there are many applications which are being developed on these two cryptocurrencies. Now I'm going to talk about one of the interesting project which have been taken up by the Singapore government. That was a large 5-year project to develop a kind of say a template or kind of proof of concept implementation of making or utilizing Singapore dollar or SGD on distributed ledger. So Project Ubin was a collaborative project with the industry to explore the use of blockchain and distributed ledger technology for clearing and settlement of payments and securities. So the idea was that whenever you are transferring money from one bank to another bank, or say you have account in one bank, say in State Bank of India, and your friend has money in Axis Bank and account in Axis Bank. So whenever you are transferring money from you to your friend, then this State Bank of India and Axis Bank, they need to make this settlement of money among themselves. So that settlements is a kind of complex task, and there are definite protocol to do this settlement. And what Project Ubin does, Project Ubin explores whether a blockchain-based technology can be used to simplify such kind of cross-banking settlement. So this project was taken up by the Monetary Authority of Singapore, or MAS, in November 2016. So MAS is something like the Reserve Bank of India in Singapore. It basically does this monetary control and designs the monetary regulations in Singapore. And this Project Ubin is complete now, and the detailed report of Project Ubin is available in MAS website. So you can actually go through this link and download the detailed report of Project Ubin to understand that what are the different components that they have implemented and what are the different success stories or the failure stories that they have seen. So it was a kind of five-phase project, and each phase had its own name. Phase 1 was tokenized STD, phase 2 reimagining RTGS, phase 3 delivery versus payment or DVP, then phase 4 was cross-border payment versus payment or PVP, phase 5 was enabling broad ecosystem collaboration. So we are going to look into all these individual phases in detail, not in detail, rather a kind of overview of these individual phases. So the phase 1 was named as tokenized STD, and the objective of this phase 1 was to form a consortium of financial institutions to conduct interbank payments using blockchain technology. So these are the set of banks which joined in this consortium: Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, Credit Suisse, DBS Bank, HSBC, JP Morgan, Mitsubishi UFJ, OCBC, R3, Singapore Exchange, or SGX, and United Overseas Bank. So they came to this consortium for settlement of interbank payments with the help of blockchain. So it included this DLT-based payment systems within MEPS Plus. So MEPS is Mass Electronic Payment System Plus. So that is a kind of electronic payment system through which these banks settle money among themselves. Right? So typically, what happens? So this is a common practice which is also done in RTGS. I guess that many of you have heard about RTGS. So in MEPS Plus, what happens that this MES, it contains an custody account for each of the bank. Well, so that custody account basically contains the amount of certain reserved money for individual bank. Well, now, say for example, SBI, or rather, let us use the name from this set of banks. Say Credit Suisse, it has its account with MAS, that reserved account with MAS. DBS Bank also has its reserved account with MAS. Now, what happens that whenever you are transferring money from Credit Suisse to DBS Bank, then Credit Suisse actually submit something called a pledge cash, right? Pledge for that cash to MAS. Um, so those individual accountancy for the individual banks is maintained at MAS, and MAS basically designate that or find that reserve amount says that Credit Suisse has X dollar, S Singapore dollar with it, and DBS Bank has Y Singapore dollar with it. Right? And assume that based on certain set of transactions, a total amount of K Singapore dollar has been transferred from Credit Suisse to DBS Bank. Now, what MAS does, MAS deduct K from Credit Suisse account and add it to the DBS Bank. Well, so it deduct K from X and add that K to Y. So that way it is just a kind of ledger transfer of the money without having any physical transfer of the Singapore dollar. So that kind of transfer settlement was visualized to be done on top of DLT with the help of smart contract. We are going to see that how that has been facilitated. And this kind of architecture is typically used in RTGS. RTGS, where the central banks maintain such kind of interbank transfer between two banks. So MEPS is just like the Singapore's version of RTGS, and that help two banks to settle the money between each other rather than physically transferring the money, well, from one bank to another bank. So that was the kind of broad idea of bringing distributed ledger technology with the help of Project Ubin. So the typical settlement, as I have said, that whenever you are transferring money from bank A to bank B, the ideal way it goes through the MS. Well, so you are transferring certain amount of money. So there can be two ways the settlement can be done. Historically, what happened that bank A transferred that much of cash from its account to bank B's account. Now with that help of core e-banking system and the electronic banking infrastructure, there is no physical transfer of money, rather you just deduct the amount, or the central bank or the reserve bank, they deduct the amount in the ledger of one bank and add that amount to the ledger of another bank. So that was done by MS. So an RTGS system is actually facilitated that. An RTGS system typically what it does, the full form of RTGS is real time gross settlement. So why it is real time? Because what RTGS does, that whenever you are transferring large amount of money, say in Indian system, this RTGS is monitored by the Reserve Bank of India. Now what happens that if you are doing a RTGS transfer to your friend, first of all, RTGS has some minimum limit. I forgot the exact minimum limit, but say it is a large amount. Say you are transferring some 5 lakh rupees directly from your account to your friend's account. Now these two accounts are maintained in two different banks, so the banks need to settle that money. Now with RTGS, what happens that this 2 lakh account, whenever you are doing that RTGS transfer, that goes to the Reserve Bank. And what Reserve Bank does, Reserve Bank immediately deduct 2 lakh from your bank's account and adds that to your friend's bank account. Okay, and that way the settlement is done between the bank rather than having any physical transfer of the money. Now, with the help of this Project Ubin, which takes this DLT in the space, for such kind of interbank ledger updates, you don't need to always depend on MAS or the central bank or the reserve bank. Rather, the individual banks can directly do that ledger transfer among themselves. So, you are maintaining a decentralized ledger, so one bank will deduct that money in the decentralized ledger, or rather, you are having a smart contract that will deduct the money in the ledger of one bank and add that money to the ledger of another bank. Right? So that way, with the help of DLT, you don't need the involvement of MAS every time. So the banks can do it among themselves directly, and that way it can also scale up the system. So the load at the MAS is much lower. So that was the kind of core idea. Now, after this broad idea that was developed during phase 1 of UBIN, that this phase 2 of UBIN comes, which again tries to solve some of the problems associated with RTGS. This phase 2 was led by MAS and associations of banks in Singapore, or it is called ABS. It developed this POC using 3 DLT platforms, Ethereum, Fabric, and Corda. This implementation was open source, so you can actually browse through this GitHub link of Project Ubin, and you can look into that source. So one of the interesting aspect of this phase 2 of Project Ubin, as I was mentioning, that it solves a few problems in RTGS. So one was that problem of gridlock. So what is the problem of gridlock? So the problem of gridlock is something like this. Say that the reserved account that is being maintained at the central bank or MAS is that bank 1 has a balance of $50K, bank 2 has a balance of $100K, and bank 3 has a balance of $20K. Now assume that there are 3 transactions which are happening, 3 RTGS kind of large transactions. that one account holder at bank 3 transfers $50K to another account holder at bank 1. Then one account holder at bank 1 transfers $100K to another account holder at bank 2. And then a third account holder at bank 2 transfers say $130K to another account holder at bank 3. Now here you see that the individual account holder has that much of money in their account, but the central ledger that is being maintained by the central bank or here the MAS, there the banks do not have that much of balance. Now because bank 1 has a balance of $50, you cannot transfer 100K here. Similarly, bank 2 has a 100K balance, so it cannot transfer 130K. And bank 3 has 20K balance, so it cannot transfer 50K. So that way, the corresponding transfers of the account holders will typically fail with a RTGS based system. Because such kind of deadlock will happen and they do not have sufficient money to facilitate those transactions. So although I have money in my account, but I will see that my bank is denying those transactions because the bank cannot use RTGS to make those transactions because they do not have that much of money in the central account that is being maintained at the central bank. But here, if you just think about effectively, if you just try to resolve this particular transaction, if you assume that the negative balance are possible, then what you see that whenever bank 1 is transferring 100K to bank 2, bank 1, the balance of bank 1 becomes minus $50K, and the bank 2 gets 100K plus 100K, that means 200K. Now bank 2 can transfer 130K and bank 2 remains a balance of 70K, and this 130K is transferred to bank 3. Now bank 3, earlier the balance was 20K, now this 130K gets added up, so gets a 150K balance. Now bank 3 can transfer 50K, so the effective balance of bank 3 becomes 100K and 50K gets transferred here. So if you remember that earlier bank was at a balance of minus 50K, now this 50K gets added up, bank 1 has a balance, end balance 0. So that way, if I do a kind of net settlement, just assuming that negative balance is possible momentarily, but at the end I can get a zero balance. Well, I can get a kind of positive balance for all the bank. So that way we can break this gridlock. We can make these transactions to happen rather than fail, and this kind of blockchain based system can facilitate that because there every transaction is getting locked, and you can actually make a comparison among individual transactions. Anyone can validate that this net transaction becomes true, that it will effectively what will happen that if I make a transfer from $30K from bank 2 to bank 3 and then $50K from bank 1 to bank 3, then the final effective balance that used to be for individual banks that get satisfied, and these three transactions can be supported, and that way you don't need to deny the transactions for your customer who have sufficient money in their account. Now, this can be facilitated with the help of DLT and smart contract, because the smart contract can see that such kind of gridlock has happened by looking into the transaction values, and it can automatically resolve these transactions. And resolving gridlock in a practical scenario is really very difficult because individual banks need to just transfer letters among them to make such kind of settlement. Now, phase 3 of Project Ubin comes. It brings up an idea called delivery versus payment, or DVP. Now, DVP is one special type of transaction. So, DVP transactions basically means that I'm transferring certain money to your account and you are going to send me certain product, or you are going to deliver me certain product. So such kind of things typically happens in case of e-commerce business or e-commerce marketplace, where I'm going to transfer the money and you are going to deliver the good that I am supposed to get in respect of that money. Now, to ensure such kind of security in DVP transactions, so phase 3 of the Ubin makes such kind of delivery of the good and services and the corresponding money transfer as atomic. Well, so these two counterparties they meet an agreed time to exchange the agreed assets. So within this time frame, I am going to transfer this asset. So you are going to transfer the money to me. So in this particular phase, MAS and SGX they collaborated to realize the domestic DVP settlement on two separate blockchain platforms. So that was the kind of broad idea. So you maintain a security ledger. So in the security ledger, you are going to put up the transfer of goods or services, and in the cash ledger, you are going to maintain the amount of cash which need to be transferred. Now, DVP transaction actually make ensure that the transfer, the transaction in the security ledger and the corresponding transaction in the cash ledger are atomic. So there was three prototypes that have been implemented by three companies, Anquan, Deloitte, and Nasdaq, and they used three different set of blockchain technology. So for Anquan, the cash ledger was in Quorum, and the security ledger was in Anquan permission blockchain. For Deloitte, the cash ledger was in Ethereum, whereas the security ledger was over Hyperledger Fabric. And the implementation by Nasdaq, there the cash ledger was on Hyperledger Fabric, whereas the security ledger was on Chainlink. Now, phase 4 of Project Bubin facilitated this cross-border payment, PPP transactions. It was a joint initiative by Bank of Canada, Bank of England, and MAS. This phase 4 was initiated in November 2018. So the idea of phase 4 was to bring transparency in the payment status, availability of cross-border payment services, reduce time for payment processing, reduce cost, and so on. The typical advantages that you can get with cross-border payments. And it considered three different payment models and analyzed their respective impact and scale. So I'm just going to highlight this model 2 of PPP that was explored in phase 4 of Project Tubin. So the idea was that for individual country, you have individual banks and they maintain different currencies. And whenever you are going to do interbank money transfer between two different countries, you are going to transfer from one currency to another currency. Now, you have this central bank for individual countries, central bank for country A, central bank for country B, central bank for country C, and so on. Now, these individual transactions which are going to happen among different banks at different countries, so this central bank need to make a log of it, or need to make a kind of, do this kind of settlement. And typically what happens that whenever you are doing this interbank transfers among different banks, so the central bank, say for example, you are transferring money from country A, a bank of country A to a bank of country B, then the central bank of country A and the central bank of country B need to coordinate with among themselves. Now what we can do that this part of this transaction settlement that happens on top of RTGS, that can be potentially kept on top of a blockchain. So that was the idea behind model 2. So there are other two models, model 1 and model 3, that you can just look into this phase 4 report of Project Ubin. It contains all the different pros and cons of these different models. Now the final phase of Project Ubin, phase 5, which target to have an broad ecosystem collaboration. So it provides technical insight into blockchain-based multi-currency payments network prototype that was built in as a part of Project Ubin. And it describes how the network could benefit the financial industry and blockchain ecosystem. So this is the kind of broad implementation that have been done in the phase 5. So you have a multi-currency payment channel, which is a blockchain-based payment network, and then you can have different stakeholders. You can have the end users having their own wallets. You can have that different currency exchange or the PVP transactions for USD, Singapore dollar, and so on. And then a number of services can be implemented on top of this multi-currency payment network, like this invoice financing, trade finance, supply chain, trade, proprietary titles, capital markets, SGS, bonds, and so on. So there can be numerous applications that can be developed on top of it. And here is an example use case that works on top of Project Ubin. So you have something called a B2P network. So B2P network was developed by this digital venture. It was developed using that CORDA framework. So B2P means blockchain for procure to pay. Well, So this B2P basically a way for automated document verification and payment processing system. So assume that there is a cross-border business between a Thai buyer and a Singapore seller. So the entire procedure works in this way that the Thai buyer submits the purchase order on the B2P for the purchase of good. Then this Singapore seller receives that purchase order, and based on the purchase order, it submits an invoice, and once the invoice is submitted in the B2P network, then this Thai buyer it receives the invoice. Now, after receiving the invoice, the Thai buyer the Singapore seller exports the good to the Thai buyer, and the Thai buyer send a payment instruction to make a payment via Project UB. Now, once this document verification and settlement is done in B2P network, then the B2P network can directly send a signal to the UBIN network, UBIN payment network to do the payment. So what happens that once this instruction has been sent to the Thai buyer's wallet, then the payments happen to the Singapore seller's wallet immediately, and this payment status is updated to the Singapore seller. So that way, uh, UBIN payment network can coordinate with other networks, other blockchain networks like B2P network to facilitate such kind of cross-border business. And that way, here you see an very interesting use case of blockchain, rather a financial use case of blockchain, a use case of cryptocurrency, where cryptocurrency can indeed be used by the banks to do the currency exchange among themselves. Well, so what can happen that the banks can actually transfer or maintain their assets with the help of a common currency, and then individual bank can do the conversion locally without bothering about the cross-border payments much. So this project you've been had been a kind of what the Singapore government claims that it had been a success, and they have learned a lot of experience from executing this project Ubin. And as I mentioned, that the documentations for project Ubin are properly maintained in the MAS website. For all the report corresponds to all the 5 phases of project Ubin. I would suggest all of you to look into those 5 reports to get an understanding about how a practical system was designed with the help of the blockchain and the distributed ledger technology, and can guide you that if you try to think of developing an application on top of blockchain, then what are the things you need to consider and how you should make an approach in solving the problem. So this conclude this particular lecture as well as conclude the course. So in the as a part of the course, I think we have learned the core design part of blockchain as well as got certain guidance about how to develop application with the help of blockchain, and how to decide whether blockchain is the best technology to solve a particular problem. So at the end of the day, end of the course, what message we want to convey to you that blockchain is a very good technology. There is no doubt about that. It has its own power, but at the same time, it has its own limitation. Right? So there are multiple different open questions. There are multiple aspects that we need to think into if we try to develop a solution with the help of a blockchain. So while doing that, so that's why rather than just running behind the buzzword and that blockchain is the future, blockchain is something that can revolutionize the enterprises or that can revolutionize the business. So rather than running behind such buzzwords, you should carefully think of whether blockchain is the prominent technology or the best technology to solve your problem. If so, go with the technology. Otherwise, think of what technology can best suit your problem. So that's all from my side. Thank you for attending this course. I hope that you have enjoyed this course. And tomorrow we are going to have the final quiz, and that way we are going to wrap up the course. Thank you for attending.